Hey y'all, welcome to Pleiadian Point of View. I'm Peyton with Peyton Energetics, and I'm a Pleiadian channel and starseed coach. So in today's POV, the Pleiadians wanted to talk to us a little bit about a really important topic, and that is how can we help people in the world who are suffering without overstepping our boundaries? But before we dive into talking about this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't done that yet. Now, an important topic has popped to the surface of our collective over the past 3 or 4 months. And this conversation first came up last summer. I want to say it was like in around the August energies, where the Pleiadians talked in the monthly energy report about something that they were noticing in the spiritual community. So this all started last summer when here in the US, we had a couple of very damaging hurricanes. And so as these very destructive storms were moving through, one thing that happened was that a lot of starseeds and lightworkers on their own, without any sort of formal organization, took it upon themselves to help those who were being affected. So lots of lightworkers and starseeds all across the world started to send love and healing energy to everyone in the path of these storms. And that is a very wonderful thing, wonderful intention behind it. And according to the Pleiadians, what happened as a result of so many starseeds and lightworkers just taking it on themselves to sit down, send healing energy to people, start to visualize positive outcomes, and they sat down and started to do their inner work, use their spiritual tools to send love to everyone who is in the path of danger. So what happens is this kind of opened the door to a very big topic of conversation, because this issue is coming up again now as we've recently been faced with the fires in Southern California. And so what the P's wanted to talk to us about is how we can use our energy tools as lightworkers and starseeds to help people who are in danger, who are in the path of a natural disaster or some sort of danger unfolding on the planet. And y'all, there's lots to choose from, without energetically overstepping. Because what can happen when we have this very good intention to be of service to others is, without realizing it, we can step on people's toes. Now, if you've ever done any sort of healing modality or been trained as a healer, something that you have no doubt been taught is that we never want to send healing energy to someone without their consent, because a couple things can happen if we do that. First off, we can interfere with their soul's intention. Some souls intended to have particular experiences, even if they're not particularly enjoyable, in order for the soul to grow, to learn a particular lesson. And if we are sending energy to someone, especially healing energy, without their consent, we can be interfering with their soul's plans. Because, let's face it, we never know what another soul has intended. So that's one of the reasons that we are taught as healers never to send healing energy without someone's permission, because we can step on their toes energetically. Something else that can happen without us realizing it is that we can karmically entangle ourselves with others, because essentially we are forcing energy on them without their consent. Now, our ego mind likes to jump in here and say, what are you talking about? Everyone who's in danger wants help, wants healing, but at the soul level, that's not necessarily true. So when we start to send healing energy to others without their consent, what can happen is we karmically involve ourselves with them. So how can we do this? How can we use our energy tools and be of service without stepping on toes? Because as we are starting to see these things unfold on our planet, where people are in harm's way, people are suffering, people are facing disasters or dangers of any kind, is we want to help. And so how can we do that without karmically entangling ourselves with others and without stepping on their toes as creators? Well, the way that the P's like to encourage us to go about this is by sending love to those people. So if we just hold those people, bring them into our heart, which is the technique that the P's are always teaching us, what happens is we are sending only the energy of love. And it's always okay to send love to someone. That never steps on anyone's toes. It doesn't karmically entangle ourselves. And it keeps us out of that sticky territory of interfering with another soul's plan. So if we're looking at something unfolding on our planet, something where people are suffering or in danger, and we want to help, rather than sending healing energy, or another way we can go sideways with this is by envisioning a particular result. So if we try to, say we're working on the example of a storm, and we want to move that storm away, and we're trying to send it in a different direction. What happens is when we are trying to focus on a particular result for someone else, we can be in that territory of causing consequences we didn't intend. Now, here's an example of how this happened a few years back. So years ago, a similar thing happened. Again, it was a hurricane story because, in the US, we've got the hurricanes. Years ago, my teachers were talking about how there was a very strong storm coming, and a bunch of lightworkers and starseeds kind of organized and did a big meditation and tried to steer the storm in another direction. And the good thing was they actually moved it away from the place that it was about to hit. But the thing they didn't foresee was by putting their intention on a very specific result, they ended up causing damage to people that otherwise wouldn't have been harmed. So without realizing it and coming from the best intention possible, they actually harmed other people. So this is one of the reasons why when we are wanting to be of service, use our energy tools to help the world, it can be helpful to stay very general. For the simple reason that as humans, we can't always foresee the consequences of a particular result. So as we are moving forward as an awakened community, whenever we see these things happening on the planet, we're starting to feel more empowered as creators, to realize we can help protect people, to realize that we can help in these situations. But what the P's wanted to talk about in today's video is the appropriate way to do that. So rather than sending healing energy to someone, which as healers, that we're always taught never to do that because that can interfere with a soul's plan. Instead, the P's encourage us to send love because we never interfere or karmically entangle ourselves when we are sending the energy of love to those who are suffering. So that's one of the reasons that the P's encourage us to use the tool of bringing people who are suffering or in danger into your heart, because all you are doing is sending them the energy of love instead of trying to put a particular result on them. Now, when we get very specific with trying to create a particular outcome, that can backfire on us because we don't always know the collateral effects of a particular action. We may think we are doing something that is helpful and actually harming other people without realizing it. So again, creates karmic ties that we don't really want to create. So a better way to go about this so that we are offering support to those who are suffering is to only send the energy of love. Now, the P's years ago, when I was going through my healer training, offered me another technique. And this is something because when I was first being trained as a healer, I was so excited. I wanted to heal everybody. So my first instinct whenever I saw someone who was suffering was to want to send them healing energy. My hands would literally jump off of my body to send them Reiki. And my guides would always pop in and go, let's not do it that way. So what they offered me as an alternative is to offer healing energy if you're determined that you want to do that, sending it as an offering to their higher self. Because when we are very intentional, very specific, that we are sending energy as an offering, we are giving the other person the opportunity to take it or leave it. And so we're not forcing energy on anyone. So this is another way that you can get a little more specific with offering assistance without creating some of those unintentional energetic consequences, because the P's see that as we are moving forward in these crazy times, we're going to have more opportunities to want to help those who are suffering. And so the P's wanted to get us off on the right foot with that so that we aren't causing unintentional harm, because we never want to do that, so that we're not interfering with another soul's free will. Anytime we are forcing energy or sending energy to someone that didn't ask for it, we get into that murky territory of potentially interfering with what their soul has planned for them. So the way we get around that is by sending love, by bringing them into our heart and offering them unconditional love, or by sending your energy as an offering to their higher self. That way you give their higher self the opportunity to take it or leave it. And you're not putting yourself in that just unintended position of forcing energy on someone. And this is just something the P's wanted to talk about because unless you have been trained in energy work for a long time, you wouldn't necessarily know this. That's why when I was starting my healing training, my initial thought was, well, everyone wants healing, right? It kind of boggles the human mind that anyone who was suffering would not want help. But according to the guides, that's not necessarily true. A lot of souls are here to have the challenge of these difficult events because they want to learn from them, they want to experience them, and so we don't want to interfere with someone else. Now, another way that we can, as lightworkers and starseeds, help people who are suffering when we are seeing these kind of global disasters is by taking the energy out of the event. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we want to be very cautious about sending strong intentions for a particular outcome. Only for the simple reason that from our human perspective, we can't see how that will play out completely. So we may be creating unintended consequences. So a better way that we can help when we see these disasters happening in the world, rather than trying to create a particular outcome, is by pulling the energy out of the event. So rather than trying to steer a storm or trying to create a particular outcome, a better way to do this energetically, and the P's are always talking to us about the energetics of these situations, is by pulling the energy out of it. So using again your heart chakra, because it is our biggest tool for converting negative energy. Another way we can help when we see these global disasters is by pulling the energy out and into our heart chakra, because as we do this, we neutralize the negative energy. So as we see something unfolding in the world that's creating a lot of pain and suffering, if we set our intention to pull the energy out of it, what happens is you collapse the event. Now, that's not to say that single-handedly you will unravel something that's going on, but you start to pull a lot of the energetic fire out of the situation. Because remember, everything is being fed by our collective energy. So as we start to pull our energy out of a particular manifestation in the world, what happens is we start to collapse it. So think of this as sucking the air out of a tire. What's going to happen to it? Eventually, it's going to collapse, right? So this is one of the ways that we can start to neutralize, as an awakened community, some of the negative things that we're seeing unfold in our world. And of course, we have just seen the fires in Southern California, which again are inspiring lightworkers and starseeds to want to be of service. And so one of the ways that we can do that is by starting to pull out the energy from it. Because as we do this by pulling our energy out of it, what happens is we're not forcing a particular outcome. Because again, that can get away from us. So this simple tool of calling the energy of that event, whatever it is that's happening in the world, calling it back to your heart, what happens is you start to pull the energy out of it. As opposed to so many of us as humans, we watch these things happening in the world and we get really upset. You know, it's just natural that we get angry, that we get into fear, that we send this energy of pity to anyone who is being harmed by it. And what happens when we look at it energetically, if we're getting into negative emotion, as we see these things, we are feeding the problem. That's just how it works energetically, because we are attaching a strong negative emotion to it. So even though we may not be personally involved in it, if we are watching this event and feeling strong negative emotions, which y'all, it's almost impossible not to as humans when we see others who are hurting to feel that sense of fear and helplessness and powerlessness. What happens energetically is we are feeding the event. So we don't want to be doing that. So one way that the P's wanted to offer us as we see these things unfolding in our world is to do the reverse. What we want to do is pull the energy out so that we're not feeding it. And as we start to collectively pull our energy out of these things, what happens is we start to collapse the timeline. So as we move forward, as we start to see more and more of these events on our world that are causing suffering for others, and we want to be of service, the best ways that we can do that are, first of all, stay in our heart. Because again, if we allow it to put us into fear and anger and powerlessness, we're feeding the problem. So we want to hold our frequency so that we can be of service. So that's number one, staying in your heart. Number two, sending love to anyone who's involved resolve. That is our way of safely sending healing energy to others. So sending love, pulling anyone into your heart who may be affected by the disaster or whatever's going on, and sending them love. And then third, if we want to start to collapse collectively some of these negative manifestations, pulling the energy out of it. Just think like you are pulling air out of a tire. Eventually, it's going to be flat, right? It doesn't have the fuel that it needs, because every time you pull your energy out of something, you take away a big chunk of its power. So these are some of the ways that the P's wanted to offer us so that we can be of service when we see these negative things happening without accidentally stepping on anyone's toes. Because sometimes without realizing it, we can energetically overstep in these situations. So the P's wanted to offer us a better way to go about this. So this gives you a couple things to work on the next time you see that news story that sets your hair on fire and you want to do something about it to be of service. You now have a couple steps you can work with to do so while staying in your lane, which is always very important. We never want to interfere with another soul. So that's what the P's wanted to share with you in today's POV. Don't forget, hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't done that yet. I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.